So yeah, he goes way back. He's a Flatiron OG. So he's also a senior dev at BlackRock. He'll tell you a little bit more about himself, but I'll let him take it away.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for being here. Yeah, as you said, my name is Chris Guthrie. I'm a senior developer and newly minted vice president at BlackRock. And Flatiron School's done a lot for me, and so I thought that it would just be the right thing to do to just give back and give a talk to you guys. So here we are. So just a little bit of background about like where I came from. I'm actually from San Diego originally. I went to UC San Diego for an economics degree and a computer science minor. And the day after I graduated, I moved to New York City because I wanted to make a bunch of money on Wall Street. So I moved here, ended up getting a job at a hedge fund, was there for like 6 years, decided it was not for me, and that I wanted to go back to coding. My dad's actually a developer, and so I've developed like my entire life pretty much. And so my friend had just recently graduated from Flatiron School, so I decided to give it a shot, and it turned out to be a very good decision so far. And about a couple weeks maybe after I graduated from Flatiron School, I got a job at BlackRock. It was very, very fast. So, right. So we're going to talk a little bit about APIs today, and I'm going to try to give this talk and make it as accessible as possible. So people of all skill levels hopefully will get something out of it. So let's just define API before we get started. So what is an API? An API, it's an application programming interface. It's a specification for one piece of software to communicate with another piece of software. So this can be a library, this can be a web API. It's basically just one piece of software saying, hey, give me some data or give me some sort of response and it complies. So we're going to talk about good APIs and bad APIs today. So first of all, what's a good API? If you're a developer and you're interested in actually using some piece of software and you need to know how to use it, well, you go to documentation. So a good API is accurate documentation. So if you can actually use something and the documentation is so clear that there's no questions you need to ask, there's no massive Googling you have to do to strain yourself to figure out how to actually use it, then that's an actual good documentation. But what's a bad API? So a bad API is when you get a moronic developer who develops some software and just puts it out there and really doesn't do much about it. So you can make an API without documentation. It's not going to be very accessible. Like how are you going to actually, how is another developer going to come around and use that piece of software? They're really not. Or maybe the incomplete documentation that makes no sense. So bad API is really just something like that. Is developer going to do one of those things? So I build a lot of personal apps in my free time out of work, and one of the apps I wanted to build really heavily leveraged APIs, so I thought it'd be a good topic for this talk. So let's talk about the genesis of this app. Let's talk about like why I wanted to build this app in the first place.
Word got around, this kid is insane, man. Took up a collection just to send it to the mainland. Get your education, don't forget from whence you came. And the world is gonna know your name. What's your name, man? Alexander Hamilton. His name is Alexander Hamilton. There's a million things he hasn't done. But just you wait, just you wait.
So back in October, I saw Hamilton for the first time, and it was basically life-changing. It was an incredible musical, one of the best things I've ever seen, and I couldn't wait to go back. But there's a huge problem. Hamilton prices are absurd. If you want to go see Hamilton right now, it's going to cost you maybe $800 a ticket or something like that. So I really don't want to pay that. I don't know about you guys. Maybe you have some rich Mr. Monopoly uncle or something. I don't. And so I thought, okay, how can I use my technical prowess? How can I use what Flatiron bestowed me to actually get into Hamilton cheaply? I don't know if they still do it here at Flatiron School, but when I got my diploma, when I graduated from here, my diploma was actually a pocket knife. So like, okay, you can do a lot of things here. Here's a bunch of tools, So how can we actually apply those tools to buy some cheap Hamilton tickets? So that is the idea. We want to build an app that actually talks to StubHub, and when prices are below a certain threshold, the app will let us know, and maybe we can take some action. So just real quickly about tickets. I know they're very annoying to talk about, especially, I'm sure everyone here loves Ticketmaster, greatest company, right? But with most tickets, Ticketmaster becomes the agent and sells them. So especially for Hamilton, there becomes like some sort of time and day when tickets go on sale. And pretty much they all get sold out instantly, and then everyone gets very frustrated and mad and throws their keyboard across the room. And then eventually all the tickets pop up on like a secondary market like StubHub for heavily inflated prices. But the thing is, a lot of those people are scalpers and have no intentions on going to the show. So what do you do when you have tickets and showtime's in a couple hours and you haven't sold your tickets? You might start panicking, right? So let's go see the StubHub API and a little bit of a code example. So here's the StubHub API. Let's bring it up real quick. So at first glance, you guys see that right? First glance, it looks, pretty much fine. Go to the documentation page. Okay, they have some API reference. What we actually want to do is that in StubHub land, they have a concept of an event, and each event has a lot of listings. So what we want to do is actually search for those listings. So let's go to the search API. And there's something down here called search inventory. So that's exactly what we want. Okay, great. So we're at search inventory. Here's the documentation. We can search. It lets us search for ticket listings for an event. Great. Well, that's exactly what we want. Here is, the route to call, things like that. How to actually send a authorization token. How StubHub API works is actually there's two separate tokens. You can some APIs you have to send the token directly, and some others you have to almost have a login request. Like if you go to the DMV or something, they're like, hey, I'm here at the DMV, and they're like, okay, great, take a seat, and then they give you permission to go talk to like an agent later or something like that. So that's kind of how StubHub works. So okay, we have this request, we have this possible payload we can send. We have all these query parameters, okay, quantity, price minimum, price maximum, great. This all looks pretty great, right? We also have like, okay, here's what a response looks like. You got different rows, you got like how many tickets, like all this cool stuff. And then down here you actually have an example. Okay, great, so here's an actual example request to get us started on our adventure of actually using StubHub's API. So let's try that. We just saw it's a regular GET request. This is not anything special. You go to google.com and you can GET requests, right? So let's just try to go to this URL just for fun. And what's probably going to happen is it's going to give us like a authorization error or something, right? So let's go try this out. We're going to click this. And so what happened here? The requested resource is not available. So what happened? What happened is that this is a bad API. So StubHub put up some documentation for an API endpoint that no longer exists. So first of all, thank you StubHub developers for wasting my time. So what do we do now? I mean, there's a lot of options here. You know that on StubHub's page, they get various ticket prices. Why can't we, right? So let's do a little Google food, right? So I Googled some stuff, and I found this guy's blog. It's actually in New York. I actually invited him tonight. Maybe he's here. Maybe he's not. And he wrote a blog post about scraping StubHub using the same APIs I'm using. Actually going to scrape it to do Hamilton tickets also. So it's like, oh, great. So reading this blog post, I found that he's actually doing exactly the same thing I am. And so there's a problem here. He's saying it's working. I'm saying it's not. So I emailed him, and he was very nice at emailing me back, and also said that it's busted, and that StubHub is dropping the ball. So now what? So like I said before, StubHub gets their own ticket data. So what did they do? So let's go to a Hamilton listing on StubHub right now, okay? So let's bring one up. Here we are. And so we're here. Let's actually bring up the code inspector in Chrome. We'll refresh the page. I know a lot of you probably can't see this. I don't think I can make it bigger. But we'll bring up an XHR request real quick. Let's see here. Okay, so here's a request right here. I know it's very small. I'm very sorry. I'll make everything else bigger. I don't think I can make this bigger. But if you can see right here, StubHub made a request to their own API, but they used V2. So the documentation that we were reading earlier had V1. So, okay, so we've somehow figured out that there exists this V2 API that's undocumented, that's out there in the world that maybe we can use, maybe we can't, but heck, we know it exists, so let's give something a shot, right? So let's actually go back and try, again, to submit a normal GET request to this API endpoint, right? So maybe if we did this right, we'll get an error. Maybe we'll get a authorization not valid or something, right? So let's just go there for fun. Bam! We actually got data. So submitting a regular GET request through the browser got us data. So we know there's an API out there. We don't know exactly what the documentation is. We're making the assumption that it's probably somewhat similar to the version 1 documentation that we read that that API doesn't exist. So now what do we do? We can't access this V2 route via the normal API using, putting it in our program or something, because when you go to register your application through StubHub's developer portal, they tell you what endpoints you're allowed to access. And because there's no documentation for this V2 route, it's not on the drop-down menu. So you can't even select it, you can't even get access for it. It's a great help. Really appreciate StubHub. So let's try something else. Let's just try to curl. I mean, we're in the browser here. We made a request. And we got data. So what is happening when we actually make this request, right? So I don't know if you guys know about curl, but curl is just a command line terminal program, right? So let's just curl here. So we're going to curl this URL. This is the same URL we just queried. Okay, so now it says, what does it say? The bearer token is not present. Okay, so now we're getting some sort of authorization problem. Okay, great. But how did we get it in here? We got it in the browser, but we didn't get it on the console when we just curled it. Well, it's because we actually have a cookie. So when we're making this request, we have saved a cookie in our browser that it submits to StubHub to make this request. So what we can actually do is we can copy this exact curl request with the cookie, and maybe we'll get some data. Okay, so let's refresh this real quick so it comes up in the network tab. So we have it here. Here's a pretty cool feature of Chrome. You can just right-click, say copy as a curl. And so we're back here. So let's paste in this massive, you ready for this? It's very big. So the cookie's very large, probably very delicious. So let's go and make this request and see if we get some data. Please. Hey, we got data, right? Especially in a ticket that's worth $3,100. Anyone want to pay for that? So great. So now we have a command that we can run on the command line that actually gets us data. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. So now what? I built a little Node app, my very first version of this, just as a proof of concept to see that we can actually use a cookie to get data and put it in our app. So let's go look at that real quick. And before I go in the app real quick, let's talk spend 30 seconds on versioning. I would strongly encourage you to version your software. It's a lot easier than going back to a git SHA to view some old code, or maybe you rolled out like a bad version at one point in time. It's just much easier to understand like what's going on when you actually version something. And yeah, so I would encourage you to tag things when you're actually doing projects. So let's go to here. Let me just see here. Let's bring this up. I call it scoop 'em because I'm going to scoop the tickets up. So I have this app called Scoop 'em, and let's check out that tag. Okay, so now we're on this tag, right? So I'll show you. I'll just run the program real quick. Again, it's just with Node. So Node, you can, if anyone doesn't know, you can just write something in JavaScript that you can execute on the command line. Node also, you can make web servers with it and various other things. It's very cool. So let's see here. Great. So let's just run this. Okay. So it's actually seeing things. No low price for events. The lowest price is $443. Okay. Great. So it's running. We'll just leave it running for a second, and then we'll go with the Ruby line here. Okay, so this code is disgusting because it's version 0.1. That's the excuse I'm using. Let's see here. Okay, so what I'm doing is, so when I was here, Avi actually was the guy who did all the lecturing. I think it's a little different now. But his theory into computer development was make it work, make it right, and then make it fast. So this is making it work. It's not right, nor is it fast, nor is it appealing, and it's very disgusting. But we actually have an app that does stuff. So what we're doing here is on line 7, we're going to run a curl command to actually get all the events that are going on in Hamilton. So they do like 8 shows a week, so there's a lot of events. We're only going to do 20, just to give ourselves a cap so we don't like go crazy. The thing with these like public APIs that are free is it's a lot like going on a first date. You're on a first date and you can ask some questions, to your prospective, person. But if you ask them a question every 1 second, they're probably going to get up and leave. So it's the same thing with the API. If you ask too many questions, if you send too many requests, you're going to get blacklisted and you're going to have a bad time. So in this case, I'm making requests spaced out. So I come up with some random number. I think I do this down here, between like 6 and 12 seconds. I don't know. And take my word for it. It's somewhere around here. I come up with some random number between like 8 and 12 seconds, and so it doesn't appear that I'm a robot, even though clearly I am. And that's what I use to actually query. So we're querying to find events. So we get a list of events, and for each event, we're going to run another curl command to actually get the inventory. And with that, we're going to see if, okay, is there 2 seats in that in these listings? Is the listing like below a certain threshold? Well, then print it to the screen. Okay. So that's something. It's something that prints stuff to the screen. So we've created our proof of concept, but that's not going to help me at 3 a.m. when someone misprices their Hamilton tickets, because I'm not going to be looking at the console. I'm going to be sleeping. So how about we send ourselves a text message, right? That sounds a lot better. So we're going to use Twilio. So Twilio is the de facto standard of like text messaging APIs. They're built like developer first, with a developer first attitude, and they do everything they can to make developers happy. And so it's a very like fun experience to actually use their APIs. So the first thing I did was buy a phone number. So a phone number cost $1. So I know it's a lot, but we did it. And I'm not going to put my phone number up there because I found out today that you can actually, if I get spammed, that actually costs me 3/4 cent per text message. So you're going to 3/4 cent me to death. My account's going to be depleted. So let's go take a look at the API, what Twilio's API looks like and how we can use it. So they actually have a page specifically for Node, which is great. So let's look at this. Okay, so installation, npm install Twilio. If you guys don't know about npm, replace npm with gem. Same thing, you know. In any like modern language or framework, there's a good way to manage your packages. So we install Twilio, and we have a exact code snippet right here of how to use it. This just warms the cockles of my heart, because this is a working, this is first of all an API that's very easy to read. We didn't even actually read the documentation. We just went to the example page and copied this out, and it works, trust me. It's a very pleasant experience to work with. So we put Twilio in our app, so let's go and check it out. Meanwhile, this is still running. Okay, so let's just run it. I actually did this version with a config file. Maybe one that I forget the file name of. Let's see. Scoopconfig.json. All right. Okay, great. So now this is running, and I know there's all this like garbage around here, but that's just from the curl command. I spent like 5 minutes trying to get rid of that, and then thought it wasn't worth my time, so I didn't. So it's running, and but what is our what are our preferences really? So let's go over here and see what our preferences are. So the cool thing about the state of the app on version 2 is we don't care that it's Hamilton. We can track any show on StubHub. You want to track the New York Rangers at Madison Square Garden? You want to track the San Diego Padres at Petco Park? You just put in the right performer ID, and that's it. That's all you do. So in this case, we want to track the 20 most recent events. Here's the numbers we're going to text, and we want a quantity of 2. Great. And so in this case, we're saying, hey, we want to pay $200 for any pair of seats in the house. So $200 each. But if they're orchestra, row F or better, we'd be willing to pay $300. Okay? And the cool thing is we can just change this, and I'll get a text. So just for fun, and I can spend 3/4 cent on you guys because I love you so much. We'll change this to $800, and we'll get a text message. So I'll just restart this. All right, so we found some tickets, and now we patiently wait for a text message, and so we got a text message. Woo. And so the cool thing here is that if you click the link in the text message, actually I'm getting a bunch of text messages now. We just spent 2 cents. The StubHub app opens automatically with the link, which is not a feature that I did, although I can say I did it. If you link to StubHub when you have the app installed, it just opens the app, which is a pretty cool feature. So you can quickly go and purchase your tickets and scoop them. So let's go look at what we're doing with Twilio here. That's not what I want to show. Yeah, that's not what I want to show either. That's the cookie. Look how big that is. Okay, so here is the function to actually send a text message. So the problem with sending a text message, let's say you're monitoring one event and you find a low price, right? So you find a low price, you send yourself a text message, and then the next time it looks for low prices, it finds that same price. Do you really want it to send you a text message every 12 seconds? Probably not, right? So we actually have a cache here that we actually clean it before we check to see if it's there to kill everything that's been in the cache for 2 hours or more. And so if the message we're trying to send has been in the cache for less than 2 hours, then we just don't send it. So that's what that is. And this is the entire Twilio API in action. See how long this is? It's like, that's it. That's the entire API that we're using, at least. I mean, you can do stuff for incoming messages and phone calls and stuff, but if you want to send a text, that's all you do. It's not very hard. So we've sent a text message. But we want a lot more. We're very far from the end state of this app. Spoiler alert, we don't even get there at the end of this presentation. My demands are increasing every day. So what if we want to send a text message for alerts to any API? We don't want this app to just be StubHub-centric. We want this app to be able to send Twilio text messages given a message, right? So, another one of my hobbies is board games. So what we can do is we can make a similar module just for board games. So there's a site out there called Board Game Geek, and they have something called the Geek Market. And the Geek Market, you can go and buy and sell board games, just like you buy and sell tickets on StubHub, right? And so the cool thing is they have an API. So let's go look at their API. So their API is very concise. It's this one entire page. There's not much on here. What you can do is, like, every board game has an identifier, and then you can provide a query parameter, marketplace equals 1, to get all the marketplace data. So this took me about 30 seconds to read and understand. It was very easy. And so now let's actually put it into our app. Oh, so this is just a little bit of a diagram of what we're going to do now. So we have one application over here that knows how to do really two things. It knows how to call a run function on any set of modules. So we only have two modules right now. One that calls the StubHub API and one that calls the Board Game Geek API. And so the Twilio wrapper knows how to call the run functions on those. It also knows how to send a text message. So when either of these modules are ready to send a text message, it sends it calls a function in the Twilio wrapper, and then a text message goes out. So that's pretty cool. So now we have version 0.3 with 100% more board games, with infinity percent more board games. So let's see. That's what we do that for. Okay. So let's go look at the code real quick. So what I've actually done is, I wish I could make the directory tree bigger. Anyways, it's hard to see, but I made a directory called camels. Does anyone know why? No? Yeah?
Fix the names of the board games?
Huh?
Can make the names of the board games work with the API?
Well, camels is actually a callback to the site Camel, Camel, Camel. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But Camel, Camel, Camel is kind of what I'm trying to build. It's kind of what I want the end state to be here. So on Camel, 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 you can go and type in any Amazon product, and you can see the price history over like 5 years of time. You can see what a used price looks like, you can see what a new price looks like, and you can get alerts, email alerts. And so that's a lot of the features that I want. And so in their honor, I named all my modules camels. So let's look at that main application directory. Main application file. So now the file to run the program is only 36 lines, 35 lines. So all it's doing is it's going to look at this camels directory and call the run function of every JavaScript file it finds in the camels directory. And that's really it. And when those camels want to send text messages, they can go and call the utility function we have elsewhere in the app. Pretty easy. And for each camel, they each have their own configuration. So, for example, here's a configuration for a board game. So we want to buy Terra Mystica at $35 or better. Cool. So let's go ahead and run this. Great. So now it's running two things. It can't find a low price for Hamilton, and it can't find a low price for Terra Mystica, right? But if we go and change that configuration, maybe it will. So great. So those configs you saw that you can edit, they're just JSON. Nothing special about them. I mean, we can just make a front end for them, right? We can make a Rails app to store our configurations. Because it's kind of tedious and not as fun to just go and edit a JSON file as it is to go in a web app and do something. So let's make this Rails app. All we have to do is spin up an app to store the configuration, and we just need to make very minor changes in the camel. So now we have version 0.4 with a CSS-free front end. You guys are gonna love it. So let's see here. I think it's 4.1, yeah. Great. So we have, let's just run it. So it's going to look very similar to what we had before, but of course we have a front end now. So let's go over here to Ruby on. Actually, let's go to Chrome. Great. Here's my beautiful front end. You guys like it? So we're tracking two items right now. We're tracking Terra Mystica at $30 and Food Chain Magnate at $80. So right now, it's not finding anything, right? So let's say we just got a great bonus, great Christmas bonus or something like that. We're interested in spending some money. Let's bump Food Chain Magnate up to $180. And we only want, actually, you know what? $280. We only want new. We only want the best. Great. So now we're at $280. So let's see if my app picks it up. Oh, it found it. Low price found. Let's see if we get a text message here. Boom, we got it. So now it gives us a link to it. We can go and buy it if we really want to. And you can actually see the caching happen right now too. Message sent recently, not sending. So if you're interested in, I'll put these slides, I've already put them on GitHub, so if you're interested in seeing what the schema looks like for the Rails app, this is what it looks like. I won't spend too much time on the slides. But what's the current status of the app? So the app is running on the VLWS at home. That's the very large web server, which is a Raspberry Pi. And I have some users that are very happy. I have one very good Hamilton success story, a guy at work who was able to buy some very cheap tickets like a week before Christmas. And I get texts pretty frequently. This was a text I got 45 minutes before a show for row A center orchestra for $289. And so it's been pretty successful. I personally haven't bought any tickets from it, but you know, other people have, so I guess that's good enough. So we got a lot of work to do though. This app is very far from being done. What can we do to make this better? I got word from my boy Ozzy, who I emailed from that Google blog post that I found. And he told me that V2 StubHub API actually will work if I make a request with authentication token. I haven't tried that yet, so let's do that. Also, let's stop running a curl command just from the command line through my app because that's kind of gross. Let's also make the front end not look like I just made it. Maybe I did. But let's actually, you know, clean it up. The funny thing is I'm a front end developer at work, and that's the front end that I do. Things like type aheads for games and events. Right now you have to type in the ID of the product manually, which is obviously a big pain in the ass for a user who would use the app and want something where you can actually type in the name of the game or the event and then, you know, derive an ID from that. What I really want to do is save the data into some sort of database so we can see the time series history of of these products or of these tickets. I already know what some of the StubHub tickets are going to look like. The funny thing is, if you ever want to see Hamilton, here's the secret. You go and buy the tickets about an hour before showtime. Because all these scalpers who don't live in New York City start to panic. So that's where the cheap seats come. And then we got to host it somewhere. We're not going to give everyone access to text messages because I'm not made of money. I'm not made of 1 cent. So we'll give email access for everyone, and maybe text messages for people I like. So the cool thing about being at Flatiron and learning everything there and going out in the world and getting a job is that it doesn't stop at the job. I've been able to make applications for literally every single one of my hobbies. I've made apps for poker, I've made apps for geocaching, I've made apps for a bunch of cool stuff. So automating your hobbies is something that I would totally encourage all of you to do. And I always think about this, with enough time, you have the skills to make anything. It's true. When you have the tools of being able to develop, you can make pretty much anything. So that's it. So thanks. So I'll take as many questions as you guys want to ask. You guys got anything?
And when someone asks a question, could you also repeat the question?
Yes. Yep.
How does your view of coding in general differ now that you're an employee as a developer versus just going to school for it?
It's a good question. I would say, like I said before about things.
Could you repeat it?
Oh, I'm sorry. You just asked. I already forgot. So the question was, how has my view of coding changed since I was a student at Flatiron? And the thing about building apps at a actual institution is that there's a lot of requirements, and there's a lot of red tape you have to get through at times to make things happen. There's a lot of procedures, especially where I work at BlackRock, to release software. You have to actually. It's kind of like when you write a math proof and you prove yourself, So there's a lot of, okay, are you sure this isn't going to blow up BlackRock? Prove that, You have to provide a very complete test suite and documentation, very thorough documentation about your app. So if you decide to, quit and move to Antarctica, that someone can actually go and take over. So there's a lot of things that that I would think about. Also, versioning. Versioning is very huge. At BlackRock, there's a lot of internal libraries we made at BlackRock, and what really sucks is when you depend on a library that's not versioned, and someone pushes some bad code to master, and you go and build your project and it fails, and you have to track down someone who didn't version their software and berate them into actually versioning, and sometimes it doesn't work. But yeah, so I would encourage you to continue to version your software and just write good documentation, so all of your developer friends can actually benefit from your code. Yep.
What gem did you use for getting the email to push out?
I don't have any email capabilities right now.
Oh, okay.
I don't know which one I would use. Oh, am I getting a bunch of? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I had my app on. I was getting floods of text messages. The only Railsy email thing I know about is just the action mailer. I don't know if I would use that. I'm not that far yet. I feel like since that part of the app is in JavaScript, that I would probably find some node module to actually use, but I'm not sure. Yep.
What is the best design or best implemented API that you work with?
That's hard. Companies, oh, sorry. Great. Cookie's yelling at me. So the question was, what is the best design API that I've come across? And so the answer, I think, you got to think about why is a piece of software being made? Is it ancillary to the business's product, or is it their core focus? And the thing about Twilio is that they're only in business because developers use their product. They don't sell anything else. They sell an API. So companies like that actually provide an API for hire are probably the best APIs out there. So I don't know. It's a good question. Put me on the spot. Maybe Twilio for now, but I'll think about it some more. Yep.
What are your strategies when you use to deal with bad APIs, like this StubHub example? Like, is emailing the developers from the company actually worthwhile, or do you like find a comparable API within another app that maybe try and replicate that? Like, what are other ways to try to
Yeah.
do that?
So what I did for StubHub is they have actually a community button on their API documentation, which has nothing there. It's like it's great representation of their developer community. Big fat no. So what I did is I called them multiple times, I chatted them, and speaking to StubHub customer support about an API is like talking German to me. So it did not work out very well. So yeah, I mean the best advice I can give you is Google. And the open source community is so large that you're probably not the first person to think of a problem. If you see someone that has actually even, tangentially touched something that you want, like reach out. There's a lot of very nice developers out there. I haven't met very unnice or mean developers. I hope you guys are not mean. But yeah, so I would really go in the direction of Google and contact fellow developers. Yeah.
Putting together like a front end, how would you deal with, because I imagine that stuff has like data structures different from Board Game Geeks is different from
Yep.
the next one that you're looking at. How would you sort of reconcile those things, like the difference in the data structure? And
Yeah, so each camel is distinct, and it handles the business logic for each distinct API response.
right.
So, I mean, that's just, reading the documentation, figure out what you have to do in order to, kind of, traverse the data or whatever. But each time you want, I mean, I don't have like one module that solves all API responses. You're gonna have to like make something that, actually reads the data. And that's just a fact of life. That's part of the business logic of any program. So, yeah, that's how I have it structured.
But how might you, like, what features might you build it into the front end to like deal with that sort of, because one, it's gonna be fed for, because it has like the name, it has like different conditions, like the StubHub's not in different conditions, Board Game Geeks not have different conditions, so you.
Right. So, yeah, the question. The thing is, there's really not a good response for this, because you're just gonna, for each data structure, you're going to have to, even with the front end, you're gonna have to deal with that. Like I had to deal with those schemas and all those models that you saw earlier. Like and you have to think about this, like, you kind of have to think about like what is the data structure. So for Board Game Geeks, what is the data structure? You have a user who has some items, right? And those items he or she could track with listed preferences, and those preferences could have any number of conditions. But again, like it's hard to just have something that like melds your data into the correct format. You're gonna have to do that yourself. Sorry, I don't have a better answer. That's part of development.
With regards to what you were saying, I was working last project with front-end APIs, and there's really not much you can do front-end wise. It's mostly back-end. So to sit through the terminal, go through each API, see what you're getting back, coerce it into what you want to see, and then spit out your front-end using like React or something like that.
Yeah, I really recommend, if you're dealing with APIs, even though you read the documentation, it's very easy to go ahead and just go through Chrome Inspector and just like, see what's in the data structure and, see what I can glean from it and move forward from there. Yep.
Have you thought about using any like messaging apps that aren't like email or like phone messaging apps like maybe like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger or something like that?
No, I haven't, but that wouldn't, oh, the question was, what kind of, have I thought about using different messaging apps besides emailing and text messaging? So I have not, but that wouldn't be very hard. So we have a utility, we have a list of utility functions that we use right now. And one of them is send a Twilio text message. You could have one that says, send a WhatsApp or send Facebook message or something like that. And whatever module you want to call them, you could go and make that. You can even have it a preference. Maybe it's a user preference. Oh, I prefer WhatsApp to text message or something like that. And whenever you call one of those camels, you could say that, okay, well, this user wants to send a WhatsApp, so I'll just call that function. So that would be pretty easy to implement. I haven't thought about that, but yeah, something that doesn't seem like an engineering challenge. Yep.
So how would you version your app at the code versioning level? So like, would you create a draft for every version, or while you're working on that, or does it still be at the feature
Yeah.
level?
So the question is really how do I properly deal with versions? How do I version my apps? And so I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that people do that. What I do at work and what I do personally is when I get to a state where master is actually at a point I want to tag it, well then I just do. And if you're using something like Jenkins or some other CI, you can make Jenkins do it for you, whenever you deploy to production or something like that. But yeah, basically you just have to think about, okay, well, is it release time? Do I think this is ready for prime time? Okay, tag. But I would never tag off of a branch. I generally work off of branches and then merge them into master. When I feel like them, and just tag master when it's time to release. Yep.
This might be a silly question to follow up, but can you explain what a tag is? I'm assuming GitHub, but...
Yeah, so tag is a Git command in order to basically mark a point in time of the state of your project. So you can, for example, if you can tag your project and then later you can tag your project again. And let's say you release some code that's like version 6, but you made a very terrible error and all your users are mad at you. Well, you can go quickly back to version 5 and release that because you've tagged it. You know that moment in time that's actually occurred. Anyone else? Yep.
What was your experience like for the first couple of months getting hired at BlackRock, going from student and working in that environment of
Yeah, so the question is, what were my first couple months like at BlackRock? I probably have like a 25% rate on me, like repeating the question. I apologize. So I feel like this at every job I go to. The first few months are just torture because I want to know everything and I don't. So I think that's true for development and non-development jobs. Development jobs especially because you could be writing some code that maybe exists in a library or something that you're not aware of because maybe your firm's documentation is in a place where you're not familiar with. But yeah, it's going to be hard. I don't know where you are in your career right now, but if you haven't got a job as a developer yet and you're entering that, just know it's going to get better. You're going to have to slog through some torturous times the first few months, but it'll get better. It'll get much better once you understand a little bit more about business and development life cycle at wherever you go. Great, I guess that's it. Thanks, everyone.